Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. Is it okay if I stand up? Yeah, I don't want to sit down because this morning I mistakenly took my cough medicine, which is supposed to gong me out. So if I sit down, I might just go to sleep. But it's okay. I think I stand up be better because I want to make the discussion as heated as possible. Nak cakap dalam bahasa Melayu, Inggeris, Tamil, bahasa Arab, what language is the best for everybody? Yeah? Dua bahasa Okay, so kita campur-campur bahasa Melayu dengan bahasa Inggeris. So my presentation today is about an ulama who has influenced ABIM, and this is very important because when you look at the history of ABIM, there are two Malay thinkers that have played a big role in the shaping of the thoughts of the early leaders of ABIM. One of that thinker is actually Muhammad Natsir, and there is a recent book that has just been published on Muhammad Natsir. I would encourage all the young people here to read the essays of Muhammad Natsir, especially his books, his 3-volume book called Capita Selecta. You must read that. Okay. The other thinker is actually Buya Hamka. And Buya Hamka is a very important thinker not only for ABIM, but also for the whole of Southeast Asia. His minds or his ideas have shaped the minds of young people up until today. I just came back the other day from Aceh. In Aceh, people are reading him again and trying to use the ideas of Hamka to try and come up with new thinking about Islam. I have just recently finished writing a book on Hamka. The title of the book is Reforming Muslim Minds, Hamka and the Reconstruction of Islam in Southeast Asia. I sent it to Cornell University Press. They are actually reviewing it. So dua for me that they will accept it, inshallah, and I will get a Malay version to be translated. And in the book, I discuss on how Hamka, someone who doesn't go to school, throughout his life, managed to write more than 118 books in his lifetime. Dia kira makan, tidur, fikir, buku. And I was joking with my wife that, I know, if you look at the history of the ulama of the past, they love books more than they love their wives. Right? So much so that there's one ulama, just to tell you a very funny story, the day he died, his wife took all his books and threw it into the basin. And then pour water on it, destroyed the entire book because the wife was so jealous. So my wife is planning to burn my books very soon. So Buya Hamka ni orang yang sangat ajaib. Dan kalau kita baca apa yang ditulis oleh Rushdi Hamka dan Afif Hamka, anaknya Hamka sendiri, every day his regime is quite straightforward. He will wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, do his tahajud. After he has done his tahajud, he will start writing. So the whole family will have to listen to the typewriter. You know, dulu tak ada Microsoft, tak ada komputer kan. So kacak until subuh. Then during subuh, his habit is to wake up everybody and then make the azan. Semua orang kena bangun. Everybody would wake up, solat subuh. After solat subuh, he will write again. Write. Sampai waktu duha, matahari dah terbit, he will stop, he will rest, and then he will go out and do his dakwah. Whatever that he needs to do. At night, he will come back, and then he will write again, and read, and then go to sleep. Hari-hari macam gitu. Macam robot. Orang Melayu kita bangun pagi, makan. Lepas solat, makan. Lepas tu pergi kerja buat apa? Makan lagi. Itu sebab tak boleh tulis buku. Banyak sangat, makan. And this is the thing that we need to learn from the ulama of the past, especially Hamka. One of the issues that Hamka was very concerned with throughout his life was the issue of women. And this is something that I feel we need to pay particular attention about right now. If you look at the state of the women all over the Muslim world today, they are in a very bad shape, especially in Singapore. I've just highlighted this yesterday in USIM. We in Singapore are now experiencing the conversion of Malays out of Islam. Masalah kemurtadan. We have a statistics of 500 people leaving Islam. They are Malays, orang Melayu kita yang keluar Islam. Out of these 500 people who are leaving Islam or have left Islam, the majority are women. It's not illegal to leave Islam in Singapore. We are a secular country. It's not like Malaysia where you have to go to, the Lina Joy, No, Singapore, if anybody decides to leave Islam, just go to the registrar of IC and then say, I'm changing my religion. Finish. It's over. You're no longer a Muslim. I like what she did. If you have anything that you want to ask me, just stop me. Okay, it's not going to be one way. We want to have it as a discussion. So, a lot of Malays in Singapore are leaving Islam. A lot of Chinese are coming into Islam in Singapore. The rate of conversion of Chinese into Islam and the rate of conversion of Malays out of Islam, there are more Chinese coming into Islam, about 600. So, this religion is Islam. It's actually for Chinese, something for you to take note of. Right? Malays don't want Islam. Okay, so Hamka is very concerned about this because during his time, in Java, in Sumatra, Muslims were leaving their religion. And so this is something about Indonesian history that we do not know. That when the Dutch were controlling Indonesia, Malang, for example, bukan Kemalangan, Malang, a place in Indonesia, the majority were Christians. And so many of the Muslims in Malang actually converted to Christianity. And again, the majority who converted to Christianity in those days were women. So I want to begin by saying, abang-abang yang ada kat sini, pakcik-pakcik, young guys here, the women are in a dire state. And we must be aware of this. And we must fight for them. Who would be the best person to fight for the women if not the women themselves? Oh, okay. Orang lelaki tak boleh fight untuk orang ni. If not for the men. And Hamka say that he will be the first to fight for the men. So I want to talk about how he does it, how he fought for the women folk, and how I am trying to fight for the women folk as well. Not so much, because my wife always tells me that's a very dangerous thing to do. So I want to talk about the status of women in Islam. First, apakah pandangan Islam terhadap wanita? We assume that we know this, especially the men. Oh, I know that women are special in Islam. And then go back, you beat them up. Right? Why Hamka became an Islamic feminist and why we men must become feminists. I am a feminist myself. I want to defend women out there. How he does it? By questioning past approaches to the Quran. So kalau kita baca Tafsir Al-Azhar, antara satu aspek Tafsir Al-Azhar is the reinterpretation of the place of women. Any one of you here have read Tafsir Al-Azhar? Ya, juzuk amak je lah. As we say, di dunia Melayu ni, orang kalau baca tafsir, first juzuk and last juzuk. Yang tengah-tengah tu daerah-daerah yang sewaktu dengannya. Kami tak tengok. So, he tried to reinterpret Islam. You don't have to take pictures, because most of it will be my picture. I will leave the PowerPoint here. Okay. I will leave the PowerPoint here to Abim, and then I hope Abim will send it to everybody. Okay? Especially for those who didn't come today. And how he tried to refine the understanding of adat and Islam. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. How even though we are in Islamic movement, Harakah Islamiyah, we are still affected by adat Melayu yang mempergunakan wanita. Oh, semua dah yes, belum lagi. I will presented this. Okay. Alright. And then how Hamka spoke about women's empowerment. How we need to empower women beyond the Western interpretation of feminism. Beyond what sisters in Islam today are talking about. And this is something that I want Helwa to do. That you guys must come out strongly and address the issues that sisters in Islam and other Western-oriented feminist groups are actually doing. We have to take the lead. Do not wait for them to talk about feminism. And last but not least, I will conclude by talking about things that we can do. Because for me, I'm not only an academician, I'm also an activist in my own society. It's not enough for us to think sama jadi ting-tong. We have to talk about this thing at an intellectual level. By the end of the day, the more important thing is to do it on the ground, right? And to change it. And what would be the best medium for this, if not Abim? Because Abim is one of the most influential movements in the world. Is that correct? Yeah, I'm quite convinced. Okay, so the status of women in Islam, we always read in the Quran, Al-Rijal Qawwamuna 'ala Nisa, and this is something that every one of us know that men are actually protectors and maintainers of women, and this is how Hamka interprets it. When we talk about the word qawamuna 'ala nisa, it doesn't mean that men are actually dominating women. Rather, men are actually responsible for everything that the woman needs. So much so that some ulama, such as Imam Abu Hanifa, interpret this ayat by saying that qawamuna means that you don't only take care of your women folk, you must ensure that they live a good life. So Imam Abu Hanifa said that every wife must be provided with a maid. Don't tell my wife this, okay? And he made it a compulsory thing during his time that women must be given maids to help them to do their work more easily. So this ayat confirms that in Islam, women are more special than men. And they are supposed to be taken care of more than men. Is that correct? Is that correct? The men folk? Panas. Okay, dah panas. Is that correct? That women has a special place higher than men. Actually, if you go by this ayat, yeah. Who? No, I mean in the time of Imam Abu Hanifa, when you have a helper, the helper would be two categories. One would be they are slaves, right? And the other would be someone who comes and help you. Usually they are slaves. Slaves in the history of Islam are not the slaves that you see in the story of American slavery. A slave di dunia Melayu, orang Melayu suka jadi hamba. Do you know that? Ni tak tahu pasal tak belajar apa sejarah Melayu, cuma belajar Malaccan Sultanate, naik turun habis. Orang Melayu suka diperhambakan. Kenapa? Kenapa? For apa? Dia humble, tak. Because di dunia Melayu, pada zaman kegemilangan Kesultanan Melayu, seorang hamba abdi mesti diberikan rumah, mesti diberikan makanan, dan mesti dijaga baik-baik. And that's why in the history of the Malay world, Malays love to become slaves. Do you know how they become slaves? By getting married. Pasal orang Melayu kalau dia nak kahwin apa? Kena besar-besaran kan? Macam mana nak buat besar-besaran? Pinjam duit kan? Macam mana nak bayar balik? Pandai kan orang kan? The best of both worlds. So they would like to have lavish weddings. They cannot pay for the wedding. They will go to a rich person, sometimes the Raja himself, and say, I want to get married, I cannot pay for. Sebab dia panggil Raja sehari. Tapi ada invisible ink, miskin setahun. So that is the concept. And you can read the works of Anthony Reid on slavery and bondage in the Malay world, that Malays love to be slaves or prefer to be slaves because slaves enjoy a lot of privileges. The same is it in the history of Islam. Abd, the word abd, right, which means slave, is not ko hari-hari kena sebat. No. Slaves have rights. And slaves must be given houses. Now you have to buy a house. If you become a slave, your master gives you the house. You work for him for a number of years. He gives you the freedom. You get a free house. Might as well jadi slave. Orang Melayu pandai kan? But later on, when bila penjajahan datang, the idea of slavery was changed to become exploitation. So you must understand, when we talk about helper, we're not talking about the amma that you have today. That is slavery. You pay her 200 RM every month. She's earning basically $2 or $3 a day. That is slavery. This is modern day slavery. In the past, when we talk about helper to the wife, the helper has rights. So much so that the helper in the end became the wives of the masters themselves. So it's a different situation. In fact, kalau kita baca, just to sideline a bit, if you read the history of the Ottoman Caliphate began with slaves. They were slaves. They were Seljuk slaves who later on became kings. Okay? If you have anything to ask about slaves, you can ask. Okay? Then, of course, if we look into the Quran fortify the notion that women are special in these two surah in the Quran. Surah An-Nisa and Surah Maryam. There's no surah with the name Ar-Rijal. Is there any? If you find any, tell me. There's none. Because Allah made it very clear through Muhammad that women are special. And because they are special, men are totally responsible. That the highest, the epitome of women commitment and dedication and piety is exemplified in the story of Maryam. Wa Maryam ibnata Imran allati ahsanat farjaha. That she is the embodiment of pure piety and someone who sacrificed everything in the path of Allah. So much so that when Allah says, I'm going to give you a child without a father, she accepted it. Right? So Maryam and the story of Maryam and Surah An-Nisa confirms the place of Islam. Even some ulama, when they study the Quran, Surah An-Nisa is put at the 4th chapter of the Quran. After first surah is Surah Fatihah, second Baqarah, binatang, right? Then Ali Imran. Ali Imran is actually the story of not only the house of Imran, but the story of Maryam. Because Maryam is part of the house of Imran, and then An-Nisa. If you look at the rentetan surah Al-Quran, the emphasis is on women. Women is the thing that is high in Islam, so much so that Rasulullah says that when the person that you must show most respect to is your mother. After that is your mother. After that is your mother. Then your father. Sebab ada orang interpret sebenarnya kita mesti ada 3 mother. Correct? Your mother kan. Pakcik ni saya baru kahwin 1 je. Anak saya 1 mother je kan. So 3 mother dia cakap. Nak kena jaga-jaga juga orang yang tafsir Quran ni. So of course the story of Amran wa Maryam ibnata Imran allati ahsanat farjaha fa nafakhna fihi min ruhina wa sadaqat bi kalimati rabbiha wa kutubihi wa kanat minal qanitin. And Mary, the daughter of Imran, Mary, the daughter of Imran, Allah emphasized, even in the surah At-Tahrim, who guarded her chastity. So the first thing that makes a woman special is her chastity. She is pure. So we blew into her garment through our angel, and she believed in the words of her Lord Allah and His scriptures, and was the devoutly obedient. Wa kanat minal qanitin. That what makes a woman special is that she is obedient. She is obedient to Allah, she is obedient to her parents, she is obedient to her husband, and she is obedient to the laws that are in place. And this makes the women a powerful force in the history of Islam. Okay? And of course, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also emphasized in another hadith, khairukum li ahlihi wa ana khairukum li ahli, that the best of men is those who are the best to his wives. So that's why I always tell people who always say, oh, we need to defend the Quran and Sunnah. We need to uphold the Quran and Sunnah. Lepas tu cakap pasal seluar atas buku lali, things that are very devotional. I always tell these brothers, you always talk about devotions, but really if you look at the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the first thing that Rasulullah emphasized other than ibadah is actually muamalah towards your parents and then towards your wife. That a man is not a proper man if he is bad to his wife. If his wife complains, something is wrong with him. So there is a very interesting story of Sayyidina Umar. Sayyidina Umar, during his time, one Sahaba wanted to complain to Sayyidina Umar about his wife, because his wife was always nagging to him. So this guy was unhappy. He said, never mind, I will ask Sayyidina Umar for advice. So he went to the house of Sayyidina Umar. When he reached the house of Sayyidina Umar, he wanted to knock the door. Before he knocked the door, he overheard the wife of Sayyidina Umar. This is the warrior of Islam. The wife of Sayyidina Umar scolding him. Kira macam marah lah. Why you do this? So this guy was thinking, this is the Amirul Mu'minin, and his wife is screaming at him. So that means I cannot be complaining to him. So he walked away from the house. Umar overheard the door. Umar opened the door and said, did you just come here to meet me? Yes. What do you want? He asked the man. And then the man said, yeah, Umar, I came here to actually complain about my wife. But when I heard your wife, I changed my mind. Because if your wife can shout at you, then why should I complain? And Sayyidina Umar answered in the most beautiful of ways. He said, "Oh my brother, she is my wife. She takes care of my house. She takes care of my children. She washes my clothes and protect my honor. Wouldn't it be right for her to complain once in a while?" Right? But if she complains too much, something is wrong. Right? So again, from the story of Omar, we realize that even someone who as powerful as Sayyidina Omar acknowledge that we must listen to the women folk, we must understand their needs, and we must always be the man, be the person who place ourselves at their mercy. Not kita jadi queen control, biarkanlah wife sepak pun tak apa. Alhamdulillah. No, but whatever they need is something that we need to fulfill for them. Okay, so in the story of Islam. Anybody has anything to say right now about a husband and wife relationship? Balik habis kena. Tu tadi dia dah cakap, kau diam. Okay. And of course, these are the ideals. These are the ideals of Islam as shown in the history of Islam. Now, I want to talk about the Malay society. During the time of Hamka, which is from 1903, he was born in 1905, all the way until he died, the Malay society was in a state of decline. And the Malay society was facing a crisis of women folk. And I want to talk about why all these conditions made Hamka an Islamic feminist. Hamka was born in a family of ulama. His father, Abdul Karim Amrullah, was an ulama who studied for 10 years in Mecca. So much so, bapanya Hamka lebih suka tulis dalam bahasa Arab daripada bahasa Melayu. In fact, he complained that his father cannot write in Malay. And it's a big problem. Later on, the father took the challenge and wrote some books in Malay. But the father was totally fluent in Arabic. His father was Muhammadiyah, Gerakan Sunnah. His grandfather was the leader of the Shazliyah Tariqah in Sumatra. So, bapa dia Salafi, datuk dia Sufi. Sekarang Salafi-Sufi nak bergaduh. But in Hamka, you see two strands. The Sufi strand and the Salafi strand. The father disagreed with the grandfather, but they agreed on one thing. What is it that they agreed on? That we must marry. His grandfather married more than 13 wives and had close to 63 children, according to the story. Hamka's father married more than around 9 wives and had, I think, about 20 ke 25. We never kept count. Even Hamka himself, in his book Ayahku, only know the name of his mothers and stepmothers, but didn't know really the name of his own siblings. He didn't even mention them actually in the book. So, satu daripada masalah orang Melayu pada zaman tu, termasuk datuk saya sendiri, who married 31 wives. My grandmother was number 29 and had 25 children. So I'm not catching up because I only have 6 and 1 wife. I'm so weak. Is that women during their time are seen as commodities. Benda. Perempuan ni macam benda. Kahwin, 3 bulan, tak syok, buang. My grandfather did that, basically. Right? He was from Penang, and Penang, a lot of nice women to choose from. Anak mami, kan? So it was a big problem. So Hamka was very, very unhappy when his father divorced his mother. He was affected by it. So much so that he ran away all the way to Jakarta, and then we went over to Mecca. So Hamka was first affected by, it looks nice, I was telling my wife, like, who's pregnant here? So one of the big problem that Hamka faced during his time is what we call as unjust polygamy. And that happened during Hamka time, right? Orang Melayu mudah kahwin lagi. Sebab dia cakap, bersatu kita tegur, bercerai, kahwin lagi. So they were marrying, having children, not taking care of the children. Anak-anak terbiar, so a lot of crime and disorder in Java and Sumatra because of this. In Singapore, it was a big thing. Someone would get married in Bedok and of course keep a secret wife in Ang Mo Kio. So one place, another place, and the wife don't know that they get married until the man dies. Can you imagine? Orang Melayu punya terror. Dia boleh sembunyikan isteri dia sampai dia mati baru isteri dia tahu dia ada lagi satu isteri. Tu dah skill lah, kita kata dah skill level dia sangat tinggi. Whatever that, so Hamka was affected by this. Whatever that is happening in the 1920s and 30s is coming back now. Do you know that? It is coming back. The men in the Malay society are using polygamy now. I'm going to show you statistics. This is Malaysian statistic, by the way, and Abim must know these statistics. So one of the things that I hope Abim will do is to study statistics. You must study the statistics of your country. Because if you don't know this, you don't know what's happening on the ground. So if you look at the statistics, there is a growth in men marrying more than one wife, marrying two wives, and these men who marry more than one wife, they usually earn 4,000 RM and below. So who is supporting the family? The wife. Because the women are getting more and more educated. As they become more and more educated, they don't want to marry lowly educated men. They went off to marry people who are far more educated. But these educated men are lazy. They don't want to work. So the women ended up supporting the family. It is a crisis now in Malaysia, without you realizing it. That there are men out there, the numbers are increasing, looking for single ladies with a lot of money and a condo that she just bought, and making use of these women. So whatever Hamka said is relevant until today. In Singapore, it is also happening. I know one man who has two wives, and he works part-time, bawa taxi and all this. He has 10 children. Every time he comes to my talks in Singapore, he will say, "Sheikh, when are you going to get married again?" I will always say to him in a very nice way, "Sheikh, when are you going to get a proper job?" You know, this is a big crisis, where you have men making use of the women. And we need to bring this up. Polygamy issue ni, we need to bring. Not that polygamy is wrong. I feel that polygamy ought to be practiced. But it has to be practiced in a proper way. Yeah. Yeah. No. I'm not debating with him. I'm just saying that his point is actually a valid one. He is basically saying that in us highlighting the fact that there is unjust polygamy, I'm trying to make it simpler because you're going around the bush. I know you're afraid of Kak Fat. Okay? In us trying to battle against unjust polygamy, we can come to the level of saying that polygamy is not accepted. And that is a dangerous route to take. So he's basically saying that in short, okay, orang Melayu ni memang dia jalan jauh kan, dia nilai, dia pergi kajang, baru dia sampai salam. Dia ketinggalan and all. The model punya polygamy story. Okay. Yeah, it's a wave that is coming back. That's why I'm telling you. Whatever the Hamka said is so prophetic in a sense. He was fighting something in his time, but whatever that he said is actually happening in our time. So the question actually goes back to the men. Because Hamka is a man. And he says, never mind if the men during my time don't want to talk about polygamy. When he highlighted the issue of unjust polygamy, he was fighting his father. His father was still alive. And having 9 wives. Of course, 5 dia dah cerai, 5 dia dah ceraikan lah. But he was basically telling, Father, you are an ulama, but I, Hamka, disagree whatever that you are doing. Now, we have to ask ourselves as men, will we come out and talk about this? So we must ask ourselves. And I think the people of Abim must be the first to do it. So that's one. Anybody have anything to say about this polygamy issue? The ladies, you are okay, right, with this polygamy thing? No, not okay. Just a very quick joke. There was a conference of female ulama. There was a conference of female ulama. 500 strong conference. It's a fictional story, but it's an interesting illustration of how polygamy is taught, how women thinks about polygamy. So women ulama coming together, okay, later you put in, coming together, and then the chief female ulama made her first speech about polygamy. She said, kami harus membela polygamy dan menegakkan polygamy. Kerana ini adalah tuntutan Allah dan Rasulnya kecuali suami saya. we have to do it, not for my husband. Okay, so that's the women's thinking, and Hamka highlights this. That he said, realistically, no woman would want this unless she has been culturalized since she was young that this is acceptable for her. So our challenge, if we really want to have this polygamy to be accepted, is to tarbiyah the women to see this as viable. From the Malaysian case, it is not possible. Kenapa? Because the men are earning so much less than the women. How can you be just when you don't have enough money to give to your wife? So it's a big problem. That's why in the time of Rasulullah SAW, when Ali wanted to marry another one, Rasulullah didn't permit him to marry when Fatima was alive. Some scholars say, oh, because Rasulullah loved Fatima. No, because Ali was very, very poor. He was working for a Jewish person, carrying water. Dia angkat air untuk orang Yahudi. Dia tak cukup duit untuk menampung keluarga dia sendiri. Okay? Can we move on from polygamy? Okay, it's already hot this side already. Okay. And not only polygamy, related to polygamy is the issue of easy divorce. During the time of Hamka, whenever, especially in Minangkabau society, the first people to ask for divorce are the women themselves. Because in Minangkabau society, women are very, very powerful. Pasal dia matriarchal and matrilineal society. So the divorce rate in Minangkabau society, according to a Dutch report, when he visited Sumatra, he said he saw a woman who was merely 30 years old, but she has been married more than 10 times. So dia kahwin. So a lot of divorce, and divorce leads to a lot of problems. Just to show you the statistics again, this is Malaysia, by the way. In Singapore, every 3 marriages that you see every week, 2 will end up in divorce. So that's why me, whenever I go for a wedding, if I go, I will always dua for the couple. Ya Allah, please make this marriage last for a long, long time. Right? In Malaysia, it is on the increase now. People are getting divorced. And interestingly, when I look at the figures, it's actually a bit lower than Singapore, but still very, very dire. In Malaysia, every 5 marriages that you see, every weekend, Saturday, Sunday, you ada banyak jemputan kan? 3 will end up in divorce. So 60% of the people that you see getting married will get a divorce. When do they get divorced? In the times of Hamka, they will get divorced in the early years of marriage, within the first 5 years. Cepat orang bercerai, like my grandfather, for example. But during our time, divorce happens at 2 stages. And I was explaining to my wife about this. The first is the first 5 years, baru-baru kahwin. The second is after 20 years of marriage. What is now called, they have a term for it, called mid-life divorce. The husband is already 50, the wife is 45, usually 5 years younger kan. Kalau orang Melayu kan, dia nak kahwin muda, like me lah. I marry 5 years younger than me, right? The husband is 50, the wife is 45, they've been married for 20 years. The husband feels that he's 35. The wife thinks that she's 65. So the wife is 45 and she dressed like makcik-makcik dah nak retire, ready to die. The husband is 50, dia pakai smart, kasut. Ni, dia nak jadi 35 again. So what happens? There is an emotional disconnect. The woman wants to die, the man wants to live again. Right? So we have this issue. During time of Hamka, during our time. So jadi perceraian apabila telah berkahwin selama 20 tahun. So you can imagine. So when I was giving a talk in Sarawak, I was telling this delegate of women, Perkim Sarawak, semua perempuan. 300 orang datang. I said to the ladies there, take care of your husband. Take care of your husband. The older he gets, the worse he gets. If you're not careful. And this problem, according to studies of divorce in Malay society, especially in Malaysian society, yang bercerai ni bukan orang yang tak faham Islam. Perceraian paling tinggi di kalangan orang yang memahami Islam. Orang yang tak faham Islam, dia ada konsep French love. Aku cinta dengan kau forever. Right? They have the French love. And they are much more, in a sense, fashionable. Dia dah 50 pun, dia pakai macam dia 35. Wife dia pun masih ranggi lagi, kita panggil kat ni kan. The problem is amongst, ini orang-orang dakwah. Dia dah makin tua, tudung dia dah makin besar. Kan? Color dia pun dah hijau dengan kuning aja. Okay. Pak, kalau kat Singapore, bila yang cerita jom sama-sama nak mati ni, dia makan kali kepala ikan selalu. Sama-sama nak mati. But you know, mati berjuang lah. Mati berjuang. But you know, the point is not only about the aspiration. The point is that as man gets older, and I know this because I'm turning 40, I already turned 40 this year, so life starts, right? The older man gets, the younger he feels. It's not only biologically, it's historically. This has been around for thousands of years. Ibnu Mas'ud is the Sahaba of Rasulullah SAW. When his wife died, he said that he cannot live more than 8 days without his wife. So he married again. At 80 years old. At 80 years old, by the way. Tapi orang dulu 80 pun masih gagah lagi. Sekarang 80 dah habis lah. Kan? Pun nak pergi Batam mati kat sana. But I'm just saying that we don't understand in the Malay community that men and women have different trajectories. And this difference in trajectories, Hamka highlights this, has to do with the men not understanding why the women has become like that, and the women not interested with whatever the man wants to do for themselves. So kau nak jadi muda, kau pergi pasal lah, aku nak jadi 65. 65 is the new cool, you know. But they want fun. They want you to hug them. They want you to hold their hands. They want you to go out with them, to do the fun things that you did when you just got married. But that is not happening, so divorce happens after 20 years of marriage. So Hamka highlights this. Ada perbezaan pemikiran dan budaya di kalangan manusia Melayu, lelaki dan wanita. So it becomes a big issue. We must handle this issue. Ya, ada sahabat-sahabat yang bercerai. Ya, Zaid bin Harithah, antara sahabat yang bercerai, dia kahwin dengan Hafsah kan? Dan akhirnya Rasulullah SAW jadi kahwin Hafsah. So there are a few sahabat yang bercerai. But perceraian is handled well in that society. Bila orang tu dah bercerai, wanita tu ada orang nak ambil. Contohnya Asma, right? That's the daughter of Abu Bakar. When Asma's husband dies, every man wants to marry her. Everybody is like, who's going to marry Asma first? Tapi sekarang kalau Asma Laili yang cerai, tak payah, sudahlah kan. Dia pun dah macam 65 ke tengok. Exactly, Umi Kalthun, Zulnun kan. Everybody wants to marry them first. Why? We never ask this question. Semua orang sekarang nak jadi Siti Khadijah kan. Wanita, semua nak jadi Siti Khadijah. But they never study what is Siti Khadijah. She married at the age of 40 after having married twice. In that 2 marriages before Rasulullah SAW, she had children. This we don't know from the tradition. If you read Ibn Hisham, Ibn Ishaq, it's all there. But we never read this properly. Women pun tak nak baca. She married Rasulullah SAW. How many children she had from Rasulullah SAW? 6 children altogether. 2 of them are boys who died, 4 girls who lived, but all died before Rasulullah died, except for Fatimah who died 6 months later. At 40, she gave birth to 6 children. What is she? Is she a weak woman? Tradition said that Khadijah was beautiful at the age of 40. How did she remain beautiful? How? Spa. She took care of her well-being. So this is something that I feel, I'm not blaming the women. After the first child, it's all downhill. Second one, habis. Third, kalau macam my wife dah sampai 6, lagi, forget it lah. I'm not going to take care of myself. You have to appreciate me for what I am. But I'm telling you, ladies, the men don't think like this. If you don't look good, I'm sorry, I'll find someone who's better looking. Studies have shown, and I want you to read this book by Edward O. Wilson. Edward Olwison is a sociobiologist who doesn't believe in any religion. He wrote a book entitled On Human Nature. In that book, he argued in a very controversial way after studying animals that men, he said in the book, he concluded, dia tak percaya Islam, tak percaya apa religion. I have concluded after studying animals that men, and this links back to Hamka, are by nature polygamous. By nature. And even if they are not polygamous, if they don't get married again, they will get into an affair of some kind. Of some kind. That means either you get an affair where it leads to a sexual relationship, or you get an affair where you get emotional stimulus from another woman your wife doesn't know, which is happening in Dawah movements. Brothers are very close to sisters in Dawah movements who are not their wives. And of course, they like the lady a lot, tapi takut nak kahwin lagi. Their emotions are poured onto that lady. Kat rumah dia tak nak berbual apa-apa. See, it's happening. So Hamka acknowledges this. That's why Hamka emphasized that men must know their predisposition and women must understand the needs of men. Any comments on, right? Hamka said Rasulullah didn't explain where is the rib. The story of the rib that it comes from Adam is from the Israelite tradition. We can choose to accept, but Hamka says from this hadith to this ayat Quran, it doesn't lead to the fact that women is actually created from a man's rib. Hence, he said, we do not question which rib is it from. Bila kaifiyah, we don't know. Allahu a'lam bisawab. Rasulullah knows best and Allah knows best. We don't even want to question whose rib. And it is not an important question also. Yeah? It's just an analogy. Rasulullah SAW suka pakai mithal, right, to explain that women are by nature curved in the sense that, and he has proven through many studies that men doesn't see things that women can see. We have different perceptions, and it has been concluded that they are far more perceptive. When just to go into science a little bit, I failed science anyway, but I've read some stuff because I'm trying to understand my wife as well. That when women look at men, one scan, they can already lock down who you are. Yeah, because the studies have shown, and this is psychology, so I wanted to do psychology before. This study has shown that when a woman look at a man, they look at the man thoroughly, top down, how he talks, how he looks, how he carry himself. Semua analyze. Otak dia macam cerita. Have you watched Iron Man? Right? Apa tu Jarvis kan? Dia nampak orang, okay, height, weight, his style. So this whole issue of first impression last is not in a woman. Yes, they may be very impressed with you by your predisposition, tapi bila dia analyse statistik, cara dia cakap dia, I don't like this guy. Men, when they look at women, they look at the vital organs first. I'm sorry to say this. This is the study. We always look, figure tak cantik. Okay, forget it. Right? Muka tak cantik. Okay, forget it. We don't even have the statistics. So kita tak ada Iron Man punya ni. Right? In that sense, we are very dumb. And that's why Hollywood uses this. Men are very, very susceptible to first impressions. Just put a pretty woman in a movie, everybody will watch. Even though the woman doesn't do anything, Transformers, menjerit je all the time, doesn't even say anything clever, just shout all the way. We will watch it because she's there. Right? So this is the thing. Nampak so this is what he meant to me. My interpretation is, what he meant by crooked is that they are perceptive. And that's why yang boleh menjaga anak bukan lelaki. I can see it from my wife. He can say, oh, the boy is sleepy. I look at the boy, mata dia macam gini. Macam mana sleepy macam gini? He is sleepy. Dia nak berak. Dia tengah main, macam mana you nak berak? I look at his eyes, I already know. That's why for men, you can never hide the truth from your mother. You can never hide. You come to the house, kau ada masalah ke ni? Tak ada mak. Kau ada masalah kan? Correct? Pasal dia punya Iron Man punya suit dah. And this is the thing. So, in that sense, they are superior. In many sense, we are also superior because for men, the vital things matter. So that's why I always tell my friend, we went for an interview together. He came for the interview with a terrible pair of shoes. Macam orang miskin dia datang pergi interview. I said to him, if you go for a job interview and you have a male interviewer, the first thing he looks at is your shoes. Do you know that? First thing, tengok. Kasut dia senonoh tak? Tak senonoh, you will not get the job. Why? Because he knows that you are not concerned with these little things. The women will not do that. Okay, your shoes were not good. Okay, his pants alright, his shirts alright. Okay, now listen to how he speaks. Then they make a judgment. We men are judgmental. She's hot, babe. Correct, right? Women don't do that. Women do, what a hot guy. No. Let's see what he is. Right? Any other people want to comment? Sebab dia halau daripada syurga. In Islam, there's no such thing. In Islam, there is a concept of collective responsibility and collective repentance as well. Men and women are responsible, and this whole idea, because Islam, in the Jewish tradition, because of the story of Adam and Eve, they concluded that women are intellectually inferior, which is wrong. Okay? And of course, the Quran, according to Hamka, is against the commoditization of women. وَالطَّيِّبَاتُ لِلطَّيِّبِينَ وَالطَّيِّبُونَ لِلطَّيِّبَاتِ. Right? That there is no such thing as only one group, which is the men, who is more important than the women. And there is no such thing as the commoditization of women. This whole idea of jual anak, which is happening now in dunia Melayu now. Bagaimana kita jual anak? How do we commoditize our children, our women? Kahwinkan dengan orang kaya ada satu benda lah, tapi kahwin dengan orang kaya bagus kan, hidup senang. But daripada hantaran, berapa hantaran kat sini? Not sorry, that's the mahar. Berapa dia punya mas kahwin? Okay, call it mas kahwin. Berapa mas kahwin sekarang? What? Hantaran? 10,000. In Singapore, it's at least 10,000 Singapore dollars, which is now 33,000 Singapore dollars. So if you want to get married in Singapore, a man needs to have at least 25,000 Singapore dollars. They even did a calculation of it. So to get married, you need 75,000 RM. Imagine you are working as a delivery driver. After the first day of marriage, you will have no money, and that leads to crisis, and that leads to divorce. Sampai sekarang orang Melayu masih nak minta hantaran ini. Hantaran ini merosakkan masyarakat Melayu. And Hamka explains why this is bad. The problem is the Malays do not understand the purpose of hantaran. What is the purpose of hantaran? Sekarang dia jadi valuation rumah, dia jadi valuation anak. Lagi tinggi hantaran berarti anak tu lebih pandai. Right? But what is the purpose of hantaran? Kos kenduri. Hantaran during the old days is very Islamic. It is money that the man has to raise. Dia kena cari duit ni dengan bekerja keras, so that it will be given to the parents of the women on the day of marriage as evidence that you can take care of my daughter. That money can be used for the wedding if necessary, but most of the time the proper tradition is to return back the money to the daughter so that she can live a good life after marriage. That is the purpose of the hantaran. Sebagai satu bukti yang lelaki ini boleh jaga anak yang akan diambil daripada bapanya. Adat yang sangat baik dan indah, if you ask me. The best adat that we ever had. But now it has been made use of by the parents themselves. Dia dapat hantaran, dia simpan, pergi umrah, anak miskin. So this is the problem now. Women has become commoditized, even by Muslims who understand about Islam. So really, if you ask me, we shouldn't have this hantaran anymore. Before you marry your daughter to someone, you ask the guy, awak kerja apa? Awak gaji berapa? You can ask this, because in Islam you have the right to question the man. Awak boleh jaga anak saya tak? Ada cukup duit tak nanti nak beli rumah? Alright, go. Make the wedding simple. Sahabat Rasulullah SAW, hantaran dia adalah selipar. Wah, aku nak kahwin nanti selipar je boleh. Sandal Clarks pun jadilah. It is as simple as possible. And Hamka says during his time in Minangkabau society, to get married, you will be in debt until you get your second and third child. You will still have the debt of your marriage. So perempuan ni menjadi benda bagi orang-orang Melayu. Okay, so he says we have to redefine adat and Islam. Adat should empower and not exploit women. Hamka says. Kita harus ada adat Melayu, tetapi adat Melayu mesti bersendi syarak. Masalahnya orang-orang Melayu ialah adat adalah segala-galanya. Adat is everything. Biar mati anak, jangan mati adat. Hatta orang yang dalam gerakan Islam pun kahwin besar-besaran, memberi satu gambaran yang salah kepada masyarakat di luar sana. If you understand Islam, your marriage should be as simple as possible. To tell the young people out there, it's not difficult to get married. In fact, it should be made easy. Tapi kita kalau nak kahwin aja, I tengok kat Singapore, aktivis-aktivis Islam, abang-abang dakwah, dah usrah, dah sampai tahap Ustazatul Alam pun dia kalau kahwin, Raja Johor pun kalah. Dia tukar baju je 12 kali. It's a big issue, and he says that this kind of adat doesn't empower women. In fact, exploit. Why does it exploit women? Because even the woman has to raise the money for the wedding. Can you imagine? He loves the guy, he wants to marry the guy, he's interested in the guy. Pasal dia nak kahwin punya pasal, sembunyi-sembunyi. The woman actually give the money to the guy gives it back to the parent, and then they have the wedding. It's a stupid and a silly culture that we still have. So pada pakcik-pakcik yang kat sini ada anak yang akan berkahwin, take note of, I have 2 girls myself, and this is something we need to be concerned with. Okay? And of course, he says adat should be in line with the Quran and Sunnah, and this is simple, that no adat is to be accepted if it goes against the Quran and the Sunnah, and that adat should evolve and should remain dynamic. There is no such thing as a fixed adat. If we have to remove hantaran, remove hantaran. If we have to remove pelamin, I don't understand why we must have pelamin. Do you know why pelamin is there? Ini orang Melayu pun tak tahu apa fungsi pelamin. Apa fungsi pelamin? Nak ambil gambar? Bukan. Saya cakap dulu orang Melayu, kenapa dia buat pelamin? Apa? To show people dia pengantin, of course, to showcase. But the real reason is, orang Melayu kampung dulu, kampung mana ada simen tile? Kampung semua pasir dan lumpur. Jadi kita buat pelamin supaya pengantin tu tak diri atas lumpur. Bodoh. That is the purpose of the pelamin. What really is logic? Simple logic. You raise them in another level. Of course, the concept of Raja Sehari lah, to show yang dia Raja Sehari. But it's to keep their clothes clean from the dirt out there.
But as they walk to the pelamin, definitely
tak nampak ke orang tak kapet tu? Itu that is the easiest part. Melayu banyak tikar. Okay, kat dalam kereta pun ada. That is the easiest part. But it's actually to ensure that both the husband mempelai bersih bila dia atas pelamin. Kalau hujan pun dia tak kena. Pasal pelamin selalu besar kan. Dia ada tutup dan dia ada payung, betul tak? Dia ada payung, jauhkan dia daripada matahari, jauhkan dia daripada kotor. Sekarang kat dalam hall, dia ada pelamin. Dia diri kat atas. Dia letak bunga telur. Apa fungsi bunga telur? Apa isi bunga telur? Pada zaman Hindu, bunga telur ni digunakan sebagai satu persembahan. Mereka sembah benda ni. Supaya benda ni kalau kita letak bila kahwin, perempuan itu akan mudah beranak. Dia percaya. Sekarang kita masih ada bunga telur. Patut tak beranak-beranak? Pasal kita dah ambil, ini orang-orang yang faham sunnah pun, dia masih buat benda ni. Apa fungsi inai? Ini bab kahwin. Apa fungsi inai? Perhiasan cantik, maybe, but what is the real function of the inai? Correct. Kita letak inai itu supaya mana-mana perempuan ni pergi, orang tengok tangan dia, jangan kacau. Booked already. So dia keluar mana-mana, tengok perempuan ni ada inai, orang ni dah kahwin. Pasal kita orang Melayu tak ada macam orang Kristian, dia pakai cincin. Betul tak? You wear a ring to show that you are married. Kita gunakan adat sebegini. The inai can last for more than 3 months. The inai can last for 3 months. So adat should evolve. So Hamka says, I translate it, taking from this standpoint doesn't mean that we must completely remove adat. Adat cannot possibly be removed, but it will undergo change and transformation. If adat does not follow this course, we cannot term it as adat. Pada dia, adat harus berubah mengikut zaman. Dan bukan saja itu, orang Melayu mesti memahami fungsi dan falsafah adat. Jangan jadi pak torot, ikut saja apa yang telah kamu dapat daripada bapa kamu. Hasbuna ma wajadna alaihi aba'ana. Tapi tak tahu apa fungsi. So everything in a Malay wedding has meanings. Very, very powerful, deep meanings. The question is it meaningful now? Some things are not meaningful. So when I got married with my wife, we were resisting against the pelamin. So my mother-in-law said, okay. No pelamin. On that day, pelamin appear. Just a side joke kan. Kita boleh. Mana benda ni datang? Okay. Datang juga pelamin. Nasib baik dia tak raise platform lah. Dia letak macam kerusi. Because we were, for me when I got married with my wife, we were saying, we just want to have a good marriage life. We are not concerned with the marriage day. For the Malays, because they follow the adat, the marriage day is everything. They forget that people will not remember the day you married. People will ask, how are you now that you are married? Nampak? Orang Melayu dia lupa. Tapi orang Melayu dahulu dia tak lupa macam ini. Pada dia bukan hari perkahwinan yang sebenarnya important. Yang important hari selepas perkahwinan. Dan itu sebab orang Melayu bila dia kahwin, itu sebab dia nak panggil ramai-ramai. Kenapa? Ni lagi satu last one. Kenapa orang Melayu, orang Cina kahwin dia kecil-kecil kan? Kecil-kecil. Kenapa orang Melayu kahwin dia kena ramai-ramai? 1,000 kat Singapura. 1,000 orang datang. 1,000. Sini standard. Oh, dia ada standard juga. Okey. Kenapa kena ramai orang? Apa falsafah Melayu tu? First kali dia ensure dalam ramai ni orang tua datang. Make sure orang tua datang. Kerana doa yang paling, bukan sampul. Sampul baru ni. Kerana orang Melayu percaya doa yang paling mustajab adalah doa orang-orang. So make sure ada satu tempat nanti diorang ensure untuk orang tua je duduk. Ramai pasal orang yang datang tu akan menjadi orang yang mendoakan mempelai dan akan menjadi social support. So kalau ada krisis di antara suami dan isteri, nanti orang yang datang tu, alamak kenapa diorang bergaduh? Cuba leraikan masalah ni. Sekarang semua nak kahwin hotel. Nenek nak datang pun susah. Kan? So this is a big problem. Okay? And of course, he was against women's empowerment. He wanted to understand women's empowerment beyond Western feminism. Hamka katakan dalam tafsir dia bahawa di dalam Islam wanita dimartabatkan sebelum orang barat memartabatkan wanita. Women cannot vote, he says, in a Western society until the 20th century. Do you know that? Until the 20th century, there is no universal suffrage. Women cannot vote until recently. In the Islamic society, especially in the Malay world, Hamka say, wanita boleh menjadi raja. Nampak tu? Jadi siapakah yang memartabatkan wanita? Orang Eropah ke orang Islam? Orang Islam. Say, we don't have a problem with a woman as the head of state. As seen from Aceh. Sultan Iskandar Thani. The Sultanas of Aceh. Semua perempuan. Dan Patani, Raja Ungu, Raja Biru, Raja Kuning. Dan dia tak ada nama-nama lain. Dia pakai warna. But all of them are women. So he says Islam doesn't have a problem with the talk about women empowerment because it is in our tradition. We do not need to draw from Western feminism at all, he said. It's useless to take from them. In our tradition we have it, and he says in Islam women has a set of rights, something that I don't show my wife. Okay? So if she knows this, that's it for me. Okay? They have the right and duty to obtain education. One of the tasks of a man when you get married to your wife is to make sure that she attend courses to upgrade herself. They have the right to independent property. She must own half of your property or another property. They have the right to earn money if they want it or they need it. So either they go out to work or you let her manage your money. I don't know my interbank iBanking password, by the way. They have equality of reward for equal deeds. The right to express opinion and be heard. When they want to say something, you listen. Right? The right to provisions from the husband for all her needs. If she has to go for facial, you pay for it. Right? She doesn't pay for it because that's her needs. How many times your wife go for facial? Every year? Tak tahu pasal dia bayar sendiri. She has the right to keep all of her money. You cannot question her. If she wants to keep her money, that's her money. Your money is her money. Her money is not your money. Right? So fair. The right to sexual satisfaction from her husband. The custody of children after divorce. And refuse any marriage that does not please them. This is the last point. If you want to do polygamy, the first thing you need to do is to talk it out with your wife. Do you allow me to marry another one? No. That means that's it. Forget about it. Figure out another way. Right? So maybe one strategy my father was telling me, maybe your grandfather did something that made it happen. I said, how? The second one, because 31 kan, the rest of them must be less pretty than the first one. I said, that's not true, because my grandfather's first wife was an Indian from India, kat Penang, and then subsequently they were Arabs. So my grandmother was Al-Aidid, daripada Penang, and she was far, far prettier than whoever that came before her. So I don't know how he managed to convince the rest. Maybe he didn't even convince them. He just married. So it's a big issue. So women have a set of rights. Yeah.
Bila pergi kepada to express your opinion, to be heard ni, kadang-kadang ada masalah. Kita jumpa perempuan yang very good, very dynamic pun, bila dengan suami dia, walaupun orang kata Islam, benda ni tak berjalan dengan baik.
Dia tak nak cakap.
Bukan tak nak cakap. Dia rasa dia cannot be heard.
They feel like
they not be heard.
Okay.
And kadang-kadang be heard pun tak macam mana nak cakap ya? Express opinion. Okay, be heard tu second.
Okay.
Express opinion.
They cannot be heard in the ways in which they want it. Buat cara orang lama. Orang lama dulu tahun 60-an, kalau dia nak cakap dengan husband dia, husband tak nak dengar, dia tulis surat. Wahai suamiku.
Ya betul, saya jumpa juga kawan yang dia tulis
habis
email
semua
sekarang.
Keluar.
Dia tulis email sekarang pun kan.
Dia boleh tulis buku kalau nak. So my point about being heard is this. There are some men, probably including myself, who doesn't like women to be loud against them. Apa kau tak dengar aku cakap ni, aku nak cakap dengan kau ni. Kau baik dengar siapa aku cakap. Some men don't like it, some men love it. I don't know, it depends on how you are. So you must find other means to express your thoughts and feelings. And there are women who doesn't like to vocalize it. You must understand this too. That they need a medium to express their feelings. And for some women, now we have WhatsApp. Bila cakap ada masalah lah, tak ada. Bila hantar WhatsApp, ada masalah kan. Here's the list of the masalah. So as men, we need to understand what is the best medium for our wives to express what they want. That's our duty actually. So you must know this lah. As women, you must be creative. Not all the time you must be the vocal. I want to say something. Listen now, boy. Sometimes you need to use subtle ways. Sebab I always feel orang-orang lama ni, they have the best ways to address their men. The art of doing it. Dia kasih makan dulu. Kau duduk dulu. Sedap kan bang? Here comes the cannon. Dah kenyang? Dah kenyang? I talk tu macam nenek-nenek kan. Saya, one makcik dulu jual nasi dekat my university, NUS. Ada arwah pun. Very nice lady. She said, I was not married. I asked her, kacau-kacau lah nak beli nasi kan. Makcik, saya nak tanya ni, makcik dengan pakcik ni dah kahwin lebih daripada 50, they were already 70, 50 tahun. Apa rahsia makcik? Dia cakap, rahsia saya ialah bila kami nak bergaduh, kami tak bergaduh depan anak. Pasal anak tak akan hormat saya dan dia. Kami pergi ke kebun bunga, saya yang menjerit. You see, why she does that? Pasal dia nak make sure air muka suami dia tu tak jatuh depan anak. Settle it somewhere, nobody sees, and I'm going to give it to you. Right? So, orang kata orang Melayu dulu ada adab bersuami isteri. This is lost. Why is this lost? Because we have been utterly westernized without us realizing it. Say at will. Fight whenever you want. In Islam, especially in the Malay society, this is the good adat to me. So I will answer the second question first. We must know that this issue of the rights of women, the state of the women, is our priority now. Don't marginalize this issue. We fight this issue. And men must do it first. Don't be afraid when people say, oh, kau ni perjuangkan perempuan pasal kau nak kahwin lagi kan? No. I'm doing this because the scholars of the past do it. And I'm doing it on the basis that I'm following their footpath. Rasulullah is the best and the first feminist in Islam. And I want to be like Rasulullah SAW. So that's my first thing. Make it a priority. Abim brothers, you must fight this issue totally out there. If polygamy is being made use of, you say it first. Don't wait for the women to do it. Right? So make it priority. The second one, the issue of social media. Until today, I still receive messages from women through Facebook ke whatever medium, wanting to, orang kata dalam bahasa Melayu, kacau-kacau. Doktor dah makan belum? Flirt lah. Okay, you call it flirt. I brought my wife to Malang. Malangnya Malang. I went to Malang. One of the ulama alim in Malang even said to me, kamu mesti kahwin di sini, Pak. Saya cakap, apa ni? Saya mau kamu kahwin di sini. Saya cakap, saya tak boleh kahwin lagi. Saya cakap, kenapa? Saya sudah ada 6 anak dan saya ni selalu tak ada di rumah. Macam mana nak kahwin lagi? Isteri saya cuma nampak postman, tak nampak saya. Dia cakap, kamu mesti kahwin di sini, Pak, kerana kami nak lelaki yang baik untuk kahwin dengan orang-orang di sini, hafizah Quran semua. I realised later that the person that she is trying to offer is his own daughter, who is hafizah Quran, ajar semua bagus habis universiti. So I said to him, Bapak, kalau mau saya kahwin lagi, saya bawa isteri saya datang sini. Bapak jemput saya. So he invite me for a conference. Paid for my wife punya flight and I brought her to Malangnya. Sampai sana, first day I sampai, the conference, my wife was there. Was so funny, she was laughing her way there. I sampai, dia tanya, mana istrinya? Ini istrinya. Muda sekali. Kata tadi 6 orang anak. Oh, ini lain sikit. Dia macam anak saya juga. So I told him, we went for dinner together. I was telling my wife, okay, I'm going to ask this question now. I said, Bapak, kata mau tanya isteri saya tentang kahwin lagi ni. Tak payah. Tak perlu. He saw my wife. He said, your wife, probably in his mind, your wife looks like my daughter. I don't think you need to marry again. But this is the thing, right? The issue is, as men, the more powerful you become, the more prominent you become, the more fitnah you are exposed to. So social media is the first avenue. So I'll try, whenever somebody is trying to kaci-kaci sikit, kita pakai dalam bahasa Singapore, kacis-kacis, I will tell my wife first. Before this thing becomes a big thing, I tell my wife, this woman is always sending me messages. Sometimes I show it to my wife. My wife says, jangan layan dan sudah. Right? So we must, as men, we must be very, very careful and strong. Okay. Yeah. So because I'm a little unstable, right? So you got to be. So kita nak always remind. And Hamka sendiri, in his lifetime, he was also challenged by. Siapa tak nak kahwin dengan Hamka? He is a man who can write romance novels in Islam. He is a prominent figure. Everybody wants to marry that person. But I always tell people out there, you only see me as I am talking here. As one ulama says to the congregation, there was a story of this alim. His student said, you are the best alim I've ever seen in my life. And I want to be like you. The alim said to the guy, if you really want to know who I am, follow me to my house. And then you will see the monster. So I always tell women out there, if you are impressed by me, know that there is a monster at home. which is also me, right? So we must be always reminding the Muslimah out there also to be careful, right? But of course, if someone comes to you and say, "Bapak mau kahwin dengan anak saya, Pak?" tak nak. Okay. For me, then you understand what the challenge of women is. Yeah. Yeah, correct. Okay. So Hamka also said that if you follow the Quran and the Sunnah, women can become leaders. So there is a nonsensical idea circulating in the Muslim world now that women cannot become leaders. Even leaders of Islamic movements. Hamka said there is no problem. In Islam, it's accepted in as long as the women are guided also by men. It's a very controversial thing, and that's why he said, in the history of Islam, there is the story of the Queen of Sheba. There is the story, there are so many queens that become the heads of states. There is no prohibition of women becoming the Amir. But we have to question what kind of woman she is, or whether she is as capable as men. Okay? And that the more important thing about women, according to Hamka, is their chastity and their modesty. Now he says the weapon of women is actually their modesty. To be modest, and that's why in the hadith of Rasulullah SAW, فَإِذْ لَمْ تَسْتَحِي فَاسْنَعْ مَا شِئْتَ. That if you have no shame, you do whatever you wish. And this is the problem now with women. Even though they are aware of Islam, they have come to the conclusion they can do whatever they like, above and beyond what their husband wants. And this is a big problem in Islamic movements. I don't care what my husband says. I want to do it, I do it. There's no such thing. In a marriage situation especially, there must be mutual consensus on what you can do and what you cannot do. Okay, so I want to end by saying that Hamka says that feminism and Westernism have wrongful ideas of Islam. I already explained that. And that, like this man, he agrees that feminism is mixed up with a muddled idea that women are free when they serve their employers, but slaves when they help their husbands. This is the problem now. Perempuan cakap, kalau nak tunjuk yang kita ni dah merdeka, kita pergi kerja. But they don't realize that they are exploited by their employers. The exploitation of women in the workforce is especially chronic in Malaysia. Women work doubly hard at work, but they are not promoted doubly for that. And so if you look at the heads of all the big institutes, seldom you can see women. Right? Let's not talk about the Prime Minister. Let's talk about small level. But they forget, Hamka says, in line with what this guy is saying, they forget that they must serve their husband as well. So employers, this is a crisis today, women are serving employers more than their husbands. A big crisis that has led to divorce and affairs amongst women and men. Again, I will give you one last statistic. Many studies have shown that the longer a person stays at work, the more chance that they will get into, the longer they stay in a workplace where there is a mixed gender environment, the higher the probability of that person getting into an affair. That's why I told my wife, I don't hang around the university so much. I do my work 3-4 days a week. I will be in the library just doing my own work, because I don't like to be too much in a mixed environment. But this is normal. Hatta dalam kita membuat kerja dakwah, kadang-kadang kita kerjasama dengan muslimah. Kita tengok muslimah ni, alamak cantik molek betul muslimah ni. Isteri aku kat rumah dah tengok macam rosak sikit suka. So that syaitan start coming in, and it leads to a lot of affair. In Singapore, it is a rampant problem. And that leads to divorce and all this. So we must take note of this. And secularism and materialism have led to the objectification of women. Hamka says, how can the women folk ever be attentive in protecting their honor and harmony in their families when their modes of clothing are determined by textile capitalists who are always seeking to introduce new and updated styles which are always strange. So he says, women now, even yang pakai tudung ni, mereka diperolok-olokkan oleh kapitalisme. Nak beli tudung 500 RM. Diperbodohkan oleh orang perempuan sendiri. Diperolok-olokkan, changing each and every time to the point that clothes have to be changed even when they are frequently used because fashions are changed. So he make fun of the women during this time, he was making fun of the westernized women, but now yang pakai tudung yang buat benda ni. Dia ada banyak baju pun dia beli baju baru. Dia kalau beli baju baru bukannya baju yang murah-murah, tapi beratus, kadang-kadang beribu. I was told that some of these busana muslimah cost thousands of dollars. Yesterday a lady was sharing with me and my wife. They buy something, kain samping. The price is $10,000. Oh my God, I've never heard of this before. It's a new finding for me. That's 3,000 Singapore dollars, man. So this lady, a Nobel Peace Prize, she gets to the heart of it. She said, you can judge me by what is in my head, but not what's on my head. He says. Right? So he says that at the end of the day, my fashion doesn't determine what I am. It is how I think that matters. And this is where men and women, we must rethink the place of women in society. I thank you all for your attention. Inshallah, what I hope that we will do right after this is not an academic discussion. This is a call to action. I want ABIM, especially the brothers, to make women issues as your topmost agenda first. Second, ni bukan muktamar whatever, I shouldn't mention it. The second is, I hope Hilwa will be expanded in terms of their functions. They are not an auxiliary portion of ABIM. They ought to be an independent movement within ABIM itself. Then they can be very powerful. Because right now the problem, as I study ABIM, I'm supposed to write a book on ABIM. Hilwa still has to follow everything that ABIM wants to do. There are certain things in the women side of things that they need to do it on their own. And this is where ABIM leadership must change their mind. If you need me to talk to WADA to change this, tell me. Inshallah, I hope that someday all these women issues, all these problems that we have in our society can be resolved. We start and end with the Quran and Sunnah, and let's use Hamka as one of our guides in moving forward in our society. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.